And so, we are continuing our journey into the cultural historical theory. As we identified, the main idea of cultural historical theory is to analyze the higher mental functions of humans from the point of view of development. So, the subject matter of the theory is not the structure of higher mental functions as they are, but the process of development and the process of construction of higher mental functions. And of course, every psychological theory has sort of general law on which it is based. And I think it makes sense to come now to the law which Vygotsky himself called general genetic law of cultural development. And if you look on the slide, this is the slide number 8, or number 8. You can see the formulations of this general genetic law. Before coming to these formulations, I just want to say something. If we understand the general law of the psychological theory, it means that we understand the theory. If we misunderstand or if we do not understand the meaning of the general law, we can hardly say that we understand the theory. It looks very obvious, it looks very logical, nothing to remind, but I would like you to remember this because it will be a very important point, and we will come to this point a little bit later. But now let's have a look on the formulations. And the first formulation is just directly from the book of Lev Vygotsky, and the book is called History of Development of Higher Mental Functions. And you see the translation from Russian into English, which I have been done. And if you don't mind, I can read this formulation, and you can follow taking your papers, or keeping your papers. Look, any function in the child's cultural development appears on stage twice, that is, on two plans. It firstly appears on the social plane, and then on the psychological plan. Firstly, it appears among people as an inter-psychological category, and then within the child as an intra-psychological category. This is equally true with regard to voluntary attention, logical memory, the formation of concepts, and the development of volition. This is the classical formulation of Vygotsky's cultural historical theory. General genetic law of cultural development of higher mental functions. What is interesting here? Let's have a look. Vygotsky gives a kind of list of higher mental functions. Look, he says that the law is equally true with regard to, first, voluntary attention, second, logical memory, third, the formation of concepts, and last, development of volition. What is interesting for us is that formation of concepts is included here. And this problem of the concept formation, the formation of concepts, is one of the core points in the book Thinking and Speech. That's why this formulation of the law has direct relations to the topic we discuss. Concept formation. thinking formation, development of thinking. So, then the second point which might be interesting here is that this is the law of cultural development. Vygotsky is not speaking here about mental development or intellectual development or psychological development. He speaks very, very clear about cultural development. Any function in the child's cultural development appears on stage twice. So, these 2 points I would like you to remember at the beginning. And then let's have a look on the second formulation. This second formulation on the bottom of the page I took from a famous book which is called Mind in Society. This book appeared in 1978 and it was edited by Michael Cole, and it was practically the first book about Vygotsky in English which appeared. Of course, there was one book, Thought and Language, published in 1962, this Mind in Society was the sort of first more or less complete introduction of ideas of Vygotsky to the Western psychology. And in this book, the formulation of the law looks slightly different from the original. Every function in the child's development appears twice, first on the social level and later on the individual level, first between people, interpsychological, and then inside the child, intrapsychological. This applies equally to voluntary attention, to logical memory, and to the formation of concepts. If you look on these 2 formulations, 2 quotations, one original, one translation, you see that despite slight differences between them, so the translation reflects more or less correctly the meaning of the original. Cultural development is missed in the translation, the stage missed in the translation, and some other things, and also the development of volition also is not here. But the message is more or less the same. So, according to the translation, every function in child's development appears twice. First on the social level, in social relations, and then inside the child on an intra-psychological level. And this formulation is so popular that even now there are a lot of articles, papers, and even books. And they, when they speak about these topics, they usually make a quotation from this Mind in Society, which looks quite strange because there is a Russian text and this formulation, the first one, was also translated in Volume 4 or Volume 3 of Plenum Press, 1997. And there is an English complete formulation. But this is a kind of tradition to quote the definition of the general genetic law, not from Vygotsky, but from Michael Cole's translation, which of course looks slightly strange because there is a available original or good translation. But nevertheless, what I wanted to say is that from that times, from the late 70s, the idea of development of higher mental functions looks like The higher mental function first appears in social relations and then appears next time, the second time, inside the child. And this formulation is repeated so many times, maybe thousands of times, in many, many different angles and perspectives and so on and so forth, that it is accepted by the community, scientific community, as a real formulation which do belong, or which does belong to Vygotsky's original thinking. What I'm going to tell you now, what I'm going to open you now, is that I will show that this translation and this basis for the community is not valid, it's not adequate, it is not reflecting, or it does not reflect the whole message of Vygotsky. Look, according to the tradition of understanding, the higher mental functions are very, very mystical things. They first appear in social relations or on social level. And then they appear in individual human mind. So, it looks like something appears in social relation, then this something disappears, and then this something mystically appears again inside the child. This transition from social level into the individual level looks very, very mystical. It's like a trick. Something appears, then disappears and appears again inside. The more I read this, the less I understand. How is it possible to understand the development of higher mental functions during the process of appearing and disappearing and appearing again? And I was wondering, is it really so that Vygotsky wanted to say? And now I can say that this is not original Vygotsky's message. My next slide will show you what I really mean. Oh. First, according to Lev Semyonovich Vygotsky, the higher mental function does not and cannot appear in the social relations because every higher mental function before becoming internal mental function was external, because it was social before it became an internal, strictly mental function. It was formally a social relation of two people. It means that higher mental function does not appear and disappear in social relation or in social relations. It means that higher mental function is originally, it is a social relation, not in social relations, but as social relation. The real, concrete, experiencing social relation or relationship between two individuals. It means that social relations is not a sort of area, sort of field or level where higher mental function appears. The social relation itself is a higher mental function, is the first form of existence of higher mental functions. Higher mental function is an internalized social relation between the people, not in social relations, but as a social relation. Now you see that the translation of the levels and in social relations is not correctly, does not reflect correctly Vygotsky's message. But then the question comes, if every higher mental function previously was a kind of social relation between two people or more people, does it mean that every social relation can be or can become a mental function? Well, actually, during our life, during our days, we have a lot of social relations. We wake up in the morning saying hello to wife or husband. We go and meet our colleagues on the working place saying hello, how are you? Then we call to mom by phone, speaking to her or speaking with her. So there are a lot of social relations. Long relations, short relations, very short relations, just intensive or just superficial. A lot of different. Does it mean that every social relation has a chance to be a higher mental function in the future? Of course not. This looks like a stupid question. Of course, to be able to be transformed into the higher mental function, it should be not just social relation, not ordinary social relation, not the everyday routine social relation. It should be a kind of special, or it should be a special type of social relations. But what type of social relation it is? Can we find the answer in the Vygotsky's formulation? If you look on the slide 8 back again, there is one word which Vygotsky repeats twice. Look again on the slide number 8. Not the bottom of the slide, but the top. Firstly, it appears among people as interpsychological category, and then it appears individually in the child as an interpsychological category. But what is this word? Category. How you can understand the word category? Why Vygotsky is using this word twice? Just stressing this, that the category is very important. And there is no category in the translation. But the category is the key word here. If you take away the category, the word category, when you are translating, you are just killing the message. You are just killing the meaning of the law, of the formulation of the law. Because what Vygotsky was speaking about is that to be a higher mental function, to be able to be transformed into the higher mental function, the social relation should be a special type of, social relation, which is called by the term category, which means the dramatical collision between the two people. Social relation, which appears as a sort of dramatical collision between the two, the clash, the contradiction, the debate between two individuals, two different positions, two different intentions, in the future can be transformed into the higher mental function. Not every relation, but dramatical collision. So, Vygotsky is stressing that development is a drama, is a dramatical process. I can give you an example just to make it a little bit easier to understand. Imagine yesterday you met your old friend and you were sitting and talking, and then something happened and you had a debate between, you said something wrong to him and you were very emotional, well, and he was as well, and the situation was out of the control, you were angry, he was angry, just talking, saying bad words to each other, and when you went home you were continuing the debate to him and saying to yourself that why did not I say that or this to him, and so on and so on and so on. You were just involved in this category, in this collision, in this debate with your friend, and you are completely involved and you are experiencing a lot of emotions, and your thinking is working and your memory is working, and so on and so on. And then in the morning, when you are okay, you wake up in the morning and think to yourself, what I had been done yesterday to my friend? Why I wanted to hurt him by my words. My words were very painful. How crazy I am. He is my old friend. Sometimes he is wrong, sometimes he is right. But I don't do like this anymore. And what happens to you? You are experiencing the same category, the same collision. But this collision is not between you and your friend. Or actually it is, but the place is inside your mind. You are speaking with your friend, and you are speaking to yourself, and you are remembering what you have been done. You feel shame, you feel badly. You say to yourself, hey, Nikolai, please don't do this like this next time. Be, don't be so cruel to your friends. And you are using your will, and your memory is working, and your thinking is working, and your emotions are working. All your higher mental functions are working in the fusion, in the nexus, and something happens to you. And after this deep experiencing of the drama, after repeating this drama, this category inside, you really have a good chance to change yourself, to be a little bit different kind of person, to develop yourself, to improve yourself on the way of the humanity. So changes happen with you, development happens to you, and a new combination of higher mental functions is now working inside. You are involved in this drama. And this is the second category, category number 2, which really takes place inside. That was the message of Vygotsky. Development as a drama, as a dramatical event. And that's why Lev Semyonovich is using the analogy or metaphor, or this is not a metaphor, on the theater. It appears on stage twice, first between the people and then inside the person. The stage is very important because drama is the term of coming from the theater. In the theater, there is a front stage and backstage. On the front stage, the events coming, dramatical collisions, and then people are experiencing the same on the backstage. So, and this is the main idea. which comes from the formulation. And if you look again on the slide number 8, and you see that the most important words, the concepts of category, were not translated. And the English translation is really substantially very, very different from the original message. There is nothing about development as a drama in the formulation of the taken from modern society. That's why I say and I insist that this translation does not reflect the message, does not reflect the idea, does not reflect the meaning of the law. And then I come back to my question. Do you remember I said 15 minutes ago that if we understand the law, the general genetic law, general law of the theory, so then we understand the theory. If we don't understand the general law, we can hardly understand the theory. And now, if you use the translation of the law, and if you have no idea of what category is, it means that the message, the content, the meaning of the general genetic law, which reflects the process of development of higher mental function, is unknown for you. So you can then repeat this idea of appearing and disappearing of higher mental functions, having no idea what Vygotsky wanted to say. And I'm very sorry that still even now there are many, many people who call themselves Vygotskians, but despite that they still have no understanding of what general genetic law of cultural development really says. And you are lucky. Now you know the answer. Okay. Now I think we can come to the second topic. We can come to psychological systems and the idea of systemic and sense-based construction of human consciousness. We come closer to thinking and speech, if you don't mind. But we can do it after the break. Before coming to the second item of the lesson, which is here, psychological systems and the idea of systemic and sense-based construction of human consciousness, I just would like to remind very briefly the main points we were discussed. The first was about non-classical character of non-classical psychology, non-classical psychological theory. And this non-classical theory comes from the idea that the only way to analyze, to make a research or to study the higher mental functions is to restore, to reconstruct, and to restore experimentally and theoretically the whole process of its development from the beginning to the end. And this makes the Vygotsky's approach non-classical. And the second point is that the social world, the social surroundings, the social relations is not the factor which is influencing development, but this is the engine, the source of development. And the second point of importance is that according to the general genetic law, the higher mental function was a social relation, not in but as, and the social relation of very special type, which can be called the category, the dramatical collision, dramatical event, dramatical contradiction between two individuals, and the development as a drama. those are things we discussed. Of course, these things are very theoretical, but I hope that my examples made them not so difficult to follow. And now we are coming back to the beginning of the class. If you remember, I told that during those 10 years of research, Vygotsky had made a great evolution of his own approaches and ideas and understanding of the nature of human mind. And this evolution is reflected in the book. And as I told you, Vygotsky, at the beginning, his approach was based on the cultural historical theory and based on the idea of the difference between lower functions and higher functions. And during those 10 years, he changed his approach, not completely, but quite radically. He went from the understanding of the difference, of the distance, of the distinction between higher functions and lower functions to the idea of their interaction, to the idea of their interrelations, to the idea of the psychological system. And this is very important because this is the second point. Let's say, if the first point was the point of departure, now we are coming to the point of destination, the point of arrival. And the idea of the psychological system and their analysis by unit is the point of destination of Vygotsky's thought. And I think that we have to discuss this before reading Thinking and Speech. In the year 1930, on October 9th, 1930, Lev Semyonovich Vygotsky made a lecture discussing and describing his last experimental findings. By the way, that was very interesting lecture, and if you want to read, you can easily find it because it's translated and published in collected works. But what was important here, this is quite interesting to mention, is that during this lecture he did show the change of his approach. He describes how his approach to the relation between higher mental functions and lower mental functions has been changed. And this is the quotation, quite long quotation from this report of Lev Semyonovich Vygotsky. You have the same in front of you, which I hope will help to understand clearly. I don't want to read it. I just give you 1 minute to read. I just want to draw your attention to some key words here. The content analysis. So, Vygotsky says that in the process of development and in the historical development of behavior, it is not so much the functions which change. These we mistakenly studied before. Their structure and the system of their development remain the same. What is changed and modified are rather the relationships, the links between the functions, the links between the higher mental functions and the links between higher functions and lower functions. Vygotsky says that development of such new flexible relationships between functions we will call a psychological system. That was the first paper of Vygotsky where he says that to study the functions, it is needed to change the direction from old understanding of higher and mental functions as absolutely separate to new understanding, to systemic understanding. He says that higher mental functions together, interacting with lower mental function, create a new psychological systems. Psychological systems. This is the new term, the new word, the new concept, which was formulated quite late, 1930. But that was the result of the evolution of Vygotsky's ideas. That was the result of his creative path from the cultural historical theory to new idea of systemic construction of the consciousness. And the second quotation shows in a very clear way this change of approach. I put it here, and I want you to open the slide number 15. Look, higher mental functions are not built on the top of elementary processes, like some kind of second story, but they are new psychological systems comprising a complex nexus of elementary functions that, as a part of a new system, begin themselves to act in accordance with new laws. What is interesting here is that this statement shows quite clear the change of the approach to the higher mental functions, to pour clear distinction between lower ones and higher ones, to understanding, to new type of understanding that during the process of development, the nexus, the combination of higher and lower mental functions has changed, the new system appears, and being involved in this new system, elementary functions begin to work differently according to the new laws. So this reflects the not only quantitative but mostly qualitative change in the process of development, because a new system and a new law of course, general genetic law of development is still valid, but the understanding is much deeper. The focus, the angle of analysis is a little bit changed from the developmental perspective to the systemic perspective, but still having the idea of development in mind. So here, Vygotsky wants to describe what happens with the higher mental functions and lower mental functions in the process of development. how they change being interacted and related to each other. This is the new angle of analysis. This is the new perspective, which of course is not different from the previous one, but it really reflects the process of development, but looking from slightly or just quite different perspective. And that was the evolution from distinction to the combination, from separation to unification, from the idea of two levels, two floors, two stores, to the idea of the system, of the new construction, which is not the building or double-decked bus, but like a system which really consists from two parts, two constructions, interacting constructions. So this is the transition from more or less mechanical way of understanding to organical way of understanding, from mechanism to organism. And what is interesting for us is that this change of analysis, of the angle, of the view, Vygotsky have made during the research about the concept formation, during the research about the development of thinking. What I said in the beginning, that this book, in the beginning and at the end, is written from different perspectives. Now you see all these two perspectives. What is the logic and what is the difference between them? But what is important here, if the angle of analysis has been changed, if now the human mind is seen as a kind of psychological system, it means that the approach to analysis to this system should be also different. And Vygotsky had to change the approach to how to analyze the psychological systems. Because the relations inside the system is now different. And this difference requires a new type of approach, a new type of analysis, a new ideas, a new methodology, a new experimentation. That was the challenge, that was the task. And likely, Lev Semyonovich Vygotsky did understand the task, and he did find the proper way, the proper ways, the proper methodology of the analysis of the psychological systems. He went from the analysis, from mechanical analysis to organical analysis, from the analysis by elements to the analysis by units. And this topic is itself very interesting and important. And of course, before reading Thinking and Speech, we should completely understand this new approach. Because from the very beginning, from the first chapter of Thinking and Speech, Vygotsky tries to show this change. He tries to show this new type of analysis of the development of the unity of thinking and speech. And chapter 4 or remarkable part of chapter 4 of Thinking in Speech is completely devoted to this new type, new methodology of analysis of the unity of thinking in speech as a subject matter. And I'm going to discuss this topic after the break, because now I think that we all need a break, and during the last part of the lecture I will discuss these topics. But now we have a break.